Hello and welcome to this session. My name is Nick Price. I'm the CEO of Bright Purple, tech recruiters based in Edinburgh, and I've got a personal interest in the subject. I'm a serving board member of the charity Lifelink in Glasgow, a social enterprise that is providing mental health services. Bright Purple, my recruitment company, are involved with people on a daily basis and their well-being as well as their mental health. And so today I am extremely pleased to be doing this session with Mark Williams. So Mark and myself share I suppose what can we call it? A passion. We're both South Wales Valley's minded children, basically. He's got a better accent than me because I've lived in Scotland since the 70s. But it's a great honour to have Mark here to talk tonight. Mark is an author, a TEDx speaker. He founded various charities for mental health, specifically fathers and mental health, and that's the subject tonight, fathers and mental health. It's a huge global problem. Mark is right in the thick of it as an advisor and a campaigner. He's the guru, I basically would like to say. So anyway, Mark, welcome.
No, thanks, Nick. Yeah, I think people can understand you better because I got a very broad accent, and I can certainly put subtitles on, but I'll try and speak clearly tonight.
It's a great accent, by the way. But by the way, by the end of this session, I'll probably be speaking it again anyway. So yeah. But Mark, let's start. If people watch your TEDx talk after this, they'll hear your story. But just so we can set the scene, just tell us a little bit about you and where this all started for you.
Yeah, so like a lot of parents, we all got a past history of like anxiety, some with depression, some with trauma, and I had an undiagnosed disorder called ADHD. So you can imagine, and dyslexia. So it wasn't really screened or assessed like it is today, obviously. So and coming from 70s, 80s. In school, you'd have a clip across a year. I couldn't keep still. I'm 47 next, and I still can't keep still. So I was very impulsive, and I didn't know at the time what it was. So luckily for me, my youth club helped me as a child. My mother took me to the youth club, and obviously I thrived in sport and became a British champion and all sorts of things. So I had a lot of good self-esteem as well. I don't blame the teachers, but unfortunately, it was no awareness back then. So. But basically, after they left the youth club, unfortunately, my life turned into a bit of like human traffic, I'll be honest. Very much, unfortunately, drugs, alcohol, Ibiza, all that cape out, which obviously had a place. And so, but what really changed my life really was, luckily enough, I met my wife, Michelle, nearly 24 years ago now. And, prepared. I was in a different role. I went from factory to working in sales and management, and I was earning probably more money then than I am now, but I certainly got a different passion now. But what I will say, financially, we were fine, house, company car, and it wasn't until after 22 hours labour, I remember the doctors come rushing in and they said, Mr. Williams, your wife needs an emergency C-section, and we need to get into theatre quick. And it was the first time, Nick, I ever had a panic attack like that, and I haven't had one since. And I've worked in secure units and witnessed horrific things, and even to this day, thinking your wife and baby is going to die in front of you was, for me, the worst experience. And when I went to theatre, and what I witnessed, obviously, what we know is PTSD. So, we know it's post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's actually an anxiety disorder, the witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event. And it stemmed from there, really. And obviously, Michelle was diagnosed with severe postnatal depression really quickly.
Yeah.
And, I was expecting to be back in work in 2 weeks, but I was home for 6 months. I was self-employed, no money coming in, mortgage to pay. And my personality totally changed during that time. I didn't get overwhelmed with feeling love for my son initially, because what we know with the science now, that doesn't necessarily happen straight away. It can, bond attachment and all sorts. Yeah. So as a father, I was overthinking a lot of things, thinking I wasn't good enough. Why has my wife got postnatal depression? Was it me? Is there anything I'd done? And I was slowly going down into having depression in the postnatal period.
And you obviously, I mean, it was obviously traumatic, to be honest, but how did you eventually start to realize the problem? Because we came from as you rightly said, we both came from a valleys culture where fathers were underground, they were hard as nails, and I don't remember my father ever talking to me about, he was ill or anything like that. He probably was, but it wasn't the kind of culture that we grew up in where people talked. So how did you eventually start to pull yourself out of it?
Well, like you say, it's a good point, because I got a good relationship with my father, but it was a case, if we had a problem, let's go down to the pub, let's have a pint. So that was my coping skill. So using alcohol again for the anxiety, which leads to depression, as we know. But, I was having suicidal thoughts around about the 4 to 5 month mark. And, gosh, you just keep on going, because I didn't want any attention going on myself. I wanted, my wife was having the support, and rightly so. My work's never about taking the attention away from mum, never has been. But at the time, I was just more concerned about Michelle, and I suppressed all those feelings, and that comes out in anger. I've never felt so angry in the first year of fatherhood in my life, because I just suppressed all these feelings. I'd wake up thinking my wife and baby died. And some fathers don't get those are the most severe end of PTSD. It's an anxiety disorder. That's what we got to remember. So, but certainly, I suffered on for what I know now, years, until I.
And you obviously, I mean, you said you're working in factories, you're working in sales, and then 2008, you went to Drive, your first community project. So what made you move into that at that time?
Yeah. So I wasn't the same person going back into sales. I couldn't take the pressures anymore. And that's really important. A lot of fathers I know, unfortunately, don't want to go back in the workplace for various reasons. The pressure, I could take the pressure before I had my son, but I couldn't afterwards. So in 2006, I started volunteering in my local youth club, trying to get out the sales. And then obviously the young suicides happened in Bridgend. Started to educate myself about mental health, going on a suicide assist course. And then 2008, I started work for Drive. And then, I didn't get the help still, because I thought if I went to the GP, the doctors, there'd be all my notes, and I would never get a job in mental health. So that was another reason why I didn't ask for help as well, And
do you think, just on that point, do you think that's that's a stigma, isn't it? We keep talking, mental health, we're talking about fathers today and mental health, but actually mental health through all my life has been a stigma. You would never admit that you had a problem for fear of either losing your job or not being able to get a job. Yeah. And now with mental health, not just fathers, but mental health across the world, and especially after a year of lockdown, think of how many people are suffering PTSD, how many staff members of companies are, been locked away now from colleagues and friends, etc. How many of them are suffering? So, is it still, it was a stigma, but is it still a big stigma?
I think it's improved in the last 3 or 4 years. I know certainly when I started, the fathers reaching out, fathers who are post-depression, what are fathers going to be depressed about? They didn't give birth to the baby. That was all the stuff we used to get on social media. And it was a lack of education about post-depression. Because imagine, how can men get post-depression? Well, it was always a myth. It was hormonal. Well, it's a hormone change. Your father's testosterone lowers during this time. And that's one of the things we need to encourage fathers, the skin to skin, because it actually releases oxytocin, which is good for the father and the baby as well. And actually, it gives a good shift of dopamine levels as well, because it's like a reward system. You really engage with the baby. So it's education programs we need to encourage for fathers. But certainly back then, gosh, some of the stuff we had when I first started raising awareness. But looking back now, it's not like that anymore. People are getting it, grasping it. And the only way I describe my friends up the valleys is like, if there was no pregnancy or baby, I wouldn't have had suicidal thoughts in the postnatal period. And that's the reason why I look at it. It could be a range of reasons why fathers get depressed during this time.
Yeah. You founded 2 charities pretty soon after that. Fathers Reaching Out and then Dad's Matters. So tell us about that.
Yeah, Fathers Reaching Out. So basically, unfortunately, the funding, it was getting too big, and I passed over to another charity. And Dad's Matters UK was another area. It was going to be a social enterprise. But I found that I wanted to go down a more changing the policy route in the end. And I thought it'll have a bigger ripple effect if I go around the country or whatever and explain, not just my story, but what the parents, and not just the fathers, in fact, the mothers used to phone me up and say, Mark, I'm fine, but my husband's mental health is actually impacting on my mental health, and a relationship's going to fail, and all sorts of things. So it was actually the mums who was encouraging the fathers to come to the groups as well, because basically what we were finding was if there was no holistic approach, early prevention, it was the fathers at in crisis point, like myself, 2, 3 years, 4 years later. Because my crisis point was after, in 2009-10, I lost my grandfather through dementia, and my mother was diagnosed with cancer, but she's fine. But everything I hadn't dealt with in my life all come to head. And that's when I entered community mental health teams then in 2010. I was never diagnosed with any PTSD or postnatal depression or anything. I was actually diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. So that's why, because there was no screening and assessment in place for fathers like it is for mothers now. And that's, as an advocate, I used to come across mums who had postnatal depression or PTSD 20, 30 years before. And when they were in crisis teams, nobody was asking those questions.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? PTSD is. I've got relatives who've served in the military who have either suffered it themselves or have got friends and colleagues from the military who've suffered it badly. It was always associated with the military. Nobody ever thought it was associated with common people like us outside the military. And then when I read some of the reports that you've published, it mentions it a lot. It actually mentions PTSD quite a lot. And I actually know. Well, I know one specific mum who's been very, very open about her PTSD and talked about it on social media. She's actually been on TV. She was in a Channel 4 series about PTSD, and she was a mum. But I've never heard of it mentioned that fathers are obviously suffering it. So, why do you mention PTSD so often? Because it's a term we hear an awful lot more now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And all about the military is a good friend of mine, Scott. He's a father of 7 children, 7.
Wow.
And I know. And he's funny enough up from Scotland actually himself. And so he's on in there. We're working together now because when he listened to my story, what was happening is, even though what he witnessed in the armed forces, every time there was another pregnancy, his anxiety was getting higher. And what happened was, so the medication, or his medication, whatever, he didn't associate it. And that's what's happened with fathers. The next pregnancy come along, now the anxiety is higher now because the thought of going into a labour ward, even a smell can trigger off PTSD, as we know.
I didn't know.
Yeah, so smell. So could be loads of reasons why, and also we've had fathers who had unfortunately lost partner, babies from another previous relationship during the pregnancy, never told their current partners. Now they're really anxious. Now the impact is on mum, and what we know about the science now, if mum is stressed, cortisol levels, it impacts on baby as well. So this is all about holistic approach. My work's all about parents, really, and for fathers, the same gender parents, everyone should be entitled to the same early prevention support. And that will have far better outcomes. So PTSD, you can witness a car crash down the road and nothing totally not related to you. And it can be traumatic. So it's a huge area. And
it must be costing we'll come on to it later about business, but it must be costing the global economy, untold sums of money.
Oh, absolutely. And by the workplace, Nick, it's a lot of these fathers I speak to, like myself, I'm a personal example. I was never the same person going back into my job in that pressure environment. I just couldn't function in that place anymore.
Yeah.
So luckily enough, I changed my career in the end, obviously, but this is definitely
for the better.
For the better, yeah. No, definitely.
Now you're. I've seen you speak, and it was a couple of years ago when we met, and I was blown away by you, and your purpose is absolutely, to be admired, basically.
Thanks, Nick. Nick, I'll be honest with you, I just don't want anyone going through what Michelle and myself went through during that time. And that's my aim is really, just trying to inspire people, let's say, look, if I can do it, you can do what I'm doing as well.
And another thing that obviously I certainly didn't know about it, but International Fathers Mental Health Day. You're the founder. I mean, there's so many celebrations of days. Yeah, there seems to be one every day for something. But I actually didn't know there was until I met you. And then what was that? June 2016, the first one.
Yeah, so I had an idea. I think that's the thing about ADHD. I have all these creative ideas come flowing sometimes.
Michelle write them all down for you? And
yeah, I got my board down. Yeah, I got to write them down. Otherwise, they just go But yeah, no, I was coming back from a conference and I seen Happy Wine Day, Happy Donut Day or something it was. And then I thought, gosh, International So it's always the day after Father's Day in the UK. It's always the Monday afterwards. And so 2016, obviously, prior to that date, I started pushing some awareness. And then obviously 2017, then I got Dr. Daniel Singley from California. So I wanted to make it more international. And now we got doctors in America, Australia, we got Africa, Ireland, and now it's growing. And it's actually recognized now on the Time to Change mental health calendar with World Suicide Prevention Day and World Mental Health Day. So it's growing every year now as well. And it's just a day to educate, dads to share these experiences, some research, and get everyone together really to show the importance.
And it was quite, when I was reading all about it, I mean, postnatal depression was in men, and obviously it's spoken about a lot, but actually, I mean, I'm interested because obviously, I mean, I've seen postnatal depression in women, and I've seen it with colleagues, wives, basically. But how do you? I mean, it's such a touchy subject, to be honest, isn't it? Yeah. But how do you spot somebody who's potentially suffering from? I'm thinking of all the millions, the hundreds of customers that we work for have all got new fathers. We even Bright Purple has got new fathers. How do you spot when somebody is that low that they're suffering PND?
Yeah, and it's really important to diagnose it as PND, because if you just diagnose it as depression, it becomes an umbrella diagnosis. So if another baby comes along, it could be loads of reasons, like I mentioned, So the research tells us that 1 in 10 fathers suffering from postnatal depression, at least. So that's at least that is. Anxiety is far higher than depression, and up to 50% of fathers actually get depression looking after a partner with postnatal depression. So if the mum is suffering from postnatal depression, up to 50% of dads can actually be impacted. My argument has always been, sometimes in the groups I run, it's only the dad is suffering, and that has up to 50% for mums. Is obvious in that case as well. So some of the things to look out for, past history of trauma, like I mentioned, dad's bipolar, schizophrenia, clinical depression, ASD, ADHD. So they self-managing that, and then the lack of sleep. The lack of sleep can have a massive impact on your mental health. Severe lack of sleep can even cause psychosis, can it?
Yeah.
And then dads. So, and Nick, when you think of postnatal depression in mums, and the signs and symptoms, there's not one that can't be associated with dad. So tearful, not good enough, feeling guilty, not good enough to be a mum or dad, bonded attachment, struggling. Any intrusive thoughts, dads get the intrusive thoughts, they're going to do something to the baby. They take themselves out of that situation, they go to the pub. Now dad is looking at like he's a bad dad, but he really is struggling with his mental health, So what to look out for is personality changes in the antenatal period and the postnatal period. That's what's a little bit different to mums. Men suppress those feelings, and that comes out in all different behaviours as well.
And I think it's going to be an interesting, it's going to be an interesting period ahead, because we've lived through a year. I mean, you and I have talked about this already. You've been in your attic for a year. I've been in my not attic, but I've been in a room for a year. I know how many tiles are on my neighbour's roof because I can't see every single day. Yeah, and so we're going to move into this new workforce era, where we're going to move into this era of blended workforce. Some people will go back to offices, some people just won't, and some people will spend more time remotely. And some of those people will be new fathers, because I suppose one of the things that has risen while we've been locked down is obviously people are getting pregnant. So how do you, for companies especially, how do you actually keep an eye on this kind of stuff when you're remote? Because it must be hugely difficult. It's okay, when you're face to face, you can maybe spot somebody's a little bit off, but for remote workers now, that's going to be difficult, surely.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the good outcomes, obviously, with the fathers at the moment, with fathers left in car parks, not on scans, that's having a huge impact at the moment, as we know. But I think one positive, I like to see something positive come up with something bad. The fathers have been home more, so maybe they can engage and have a bond and attachment be a little bit better than they would if they back in work in 2 weeks, because of parental leave and stuff like that. So there could be some benefits from what's happening. But I think what's so happened, which is great in the last year, I do sessions with a midwife, and we get the two parents to communicate with each other, which is a massive area what's missing. The father and the mum communicating, if they are checking in with each other as well, because that's what's causing. Mum is overthinking, am I good enough? Oh my gosh, dad is over silent. And sometimes it puts fathers off sex, this trauma.
Right.
So dad doesn't want to have sex with his partner because he doesn't want his wife to go through a trauma, or he's witnessed that trauma. And then mum is thinking, oh my gosh, is it me because I've just had a baby? Now he doesn't like me or whatever. And then because there's a lack of communication between the two parents. So with the work I do with the midwife and other professionals, we get the parents to communicate as well. But I think the way technology is going, I'm finding I'm having a bigger reach, not just the health professionals, but actually parents themselves. We could do this. We do up to like 50 parents, dads at a time, or mums at a time. So technology is definitely one of the way forward to ask the question: how is that? How are you doing? Because some of the reports in maternity services we have now, up to 90% of fathers are still not asked about their mental health at any booking appointments, and that's still in 2021. So this is why I did this report, because it shows all the evidence and the research and the science behind it to say, look, we have to get our holistic approach early on.
Yeah, when we send this video out, anybody wanting that report can get a hold of it, because I've got it, I've read it. It's actually fascinating. It actually opened my eyes to a huge amount of things, and actually I'll come on to it in a minute. But just finishing off on International Fathers Mental Health Day, I'm not going to let you get away with the fact that you got an award from ex-Prime Minister Theresa May, Point of Light Award. So tell me about the Point of Light Award.
Yeah, no, it's always nice to have recognition for the work, and it's all the voluntary work I've done over the years, really, for the fathers and stuff, and still do today. So yeah, that was really nice. Obviously meeting the royal family in 2016, that was nice, and I met different people over the years, and I think that's a good thing about this job. I met so many inspiring people from other areas who've changed their lives from what it was a bad time in their lives to something positive. And that's when me Michelle, I get a lot of credit, Nick, but my wife works in mental health as well. She changed her career, and she's more grassroots, more. And we said, if we're going to change her career, we want something good to come up with something bad. So my wife worked for a large gas company, and as academy coach, and yeah, we both changed our careers to do what we're doing now. So, and my wife's a youth worker, so I get a lot of credit, but without Michelle, I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing now, because she just says, carry on.
I was about to say, we can all kind of give credit to our other halves, I think, because mine has definitely helped keep me sane through this lockdown. So they all deserve credit. And then going on to this fathers reaching out, the report, I just mentioned it. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, and as I say, I learned an awful lot reading it. I mean, 1 in 10 dads suffer postnatal depression. That's a pretty scary number when you consider how many dads there are in a year.
Yeah, well, 75,000 fathers suffer from postnatal depression, but it was 1 in 10 for years for mums. It was. So once we get that screening and assessment, so we have changed policy in NHS England now in 2018. So the dad will be screened for his mental health only if mum has postnatal depression, because that comes with the research up to 50% of the dads. So we are getting there. And Welsh Government, I'm doing some work with Welsh Government now as well, and they're looking at a more holistic approach. And I got some good news about Wales as well, because I started the campaign for the Mother Baby Unit in 2013 when it closed, or 2014 it started. And the Mother Baby Unit is coming back in Wales now in the next couple of weeks. So, but yeah, that's one of the biggest things, because mums were going up to other services outside Wales as well. So I'm all about parents really, but I'm known for fathers. So going back to the report, like I said, up to 47 times, a father is up to 47 times more risk of suicide as a dad than at any other time in a man's life. And the reason behind that is, like I said, they don't get diagnosed with PND or PTSD. They hit crisis point 2, 3 years, 4 years. And because of lack of education, they're not diagnosed. They just get diagnosed with depression. So that's a and compared to non-fathers, up to 20 times more likely to get depression than a non-father. And BMI rates are higher in fathers and non-fathers as well. So all this stuff is actually there, the evidence now as well.
And just going back to that point about high risk of suicide in new fathers, I mean, obviously we want to support both parents. The wife, the wife who's obviously been through the whole birth process, and the dad who's, as you say, is potentially suffering. But how? Just focusing on the man for a minute, consider this is about fathers. Yeah. What about, you made a point earlier of saying, a couple of weeks later I was due back at work. Yeah. And we obviously are still pretty similar about that kind of thing. Yeah. Get back to work. It's the wife's it's the wife's time to have a little bit of a time off, and you're working. How does that affect the frame of mind of somebody coming back to work who maybe hasn't been helped? Maybe they have suffered some challenges, and are just putting the tin hat on it and saying, well, I got to get back to work. I'm the breadwinner or something like that. How does that affect their ability to do their job for an employer?
Oh, massively. And the fathers I've spoken to over the years, gosh, one father comes to mind straight away. He lost a job within weeks and he was using amphetamines just to function, trying to go to work. He never took a drug in his life up to that point. He couldn't literally get out of bed. And what we do with fathers, we mask those emotions, like we know, and we put this happy-go-lucky face on, and we try our best to get back into work. But it actually has an impact in the workplace, and he can't function like he would if he wasn't supported better. And I think it's not so much after coming back into work. We should be educating fathers when they know they become a dad, so get them to the support and help. So then if the lack of sleep or the trauma they witness, at least they've only got to deal with that then, rather than all the other stuff they've never dealt with. Because a lot of things trigger off during this time as well. It's like you've kept all your problems at the back of your head, and then all of a sudden the baby comes along, and then you witness something, and then lack of sleep, and you can't just control that. It comes to the forefront, and now you're struggling with a load of other things rather than the things you've buried, for possible years, as well. So in the workplace, we like to see, employers educated about this stuff as well. I think we've educated maternity services now, but the big things comes up with health is, dad's back in work in 2 weeks. Okay, well, let's give him some intangible information. So then when he's reading it, gosh, I'm not the only father going for this.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting because, my children are 20s now. 25 is the oldest, and my wife had 3 cesarean sections, and I must admit, I wasn't prepared for the first cesarean section, I can tell you. And you kind of think, well, at that time I'd started my own business as well, so I had no option but to get back to work. But I must admit, it kept me awake for a few nights, that's for sure, because it is. I didn't probably think about it as trauma at the time, but now when you talk about it, I'm probably thinking, maybe that impacted me as well.